Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar organized by the California State University San Bernardino College of Education through the Watsons and Associates Literacy Center at CSUSB. After more than a year of sheltering in place and dealing with family and individual pains and sufferings from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, schools are reopening and it seems like life will finally begin to return to normal. It would be a grave error to assume that school reopening would mean a return to what was a pre-pandemic normal. The pandemic is not over, though it seems to be slowing down. Its impacts will stay with us over a long period of time, and it will take much longer before we begin to see normalcy as we had known it before the pandemic. A March 12, 2021 article published by the Brookings Institution stated as follows, quote, "1 year ago, the World Health Organization declared the spread of COVID-19 a worldwide pandemic. Reacting to the virus, schools at every level were sent scrambling. Institutions across the world switched to virtual learning, with teachers, students, and local leaders quickly adapting to an entirely new way of life. A year later, schools are beginning to reopen. The $1.9 trillion stimulus bill has been passed, and a sense of normalcy seems to finally be in view. But it's safe to say that COVID-19 will end up changing education forever, casting a critical light on everything from equity issues to EdTech to school financing," end of quote. Some researchers have even predicted that many students, especially those who come from economically disadvantaged homes and those with learning and physical disabilities, will be 2 or more years behind in their academic abilities as a result of the impact of the pandemic. The result of the pre-pandemic economic and opportunity gaps will certainly translate to significant academic achievement gaps in the years to come. As schools begin to reopen, to assume a return to normalcy is to make a wrong bet. It is important that we acknowledge that many of the students who are returning to school are coming from families that have been hit very hard by the debilitating illnesses caused by the coronavirus. Some of these students are coming from families that have lost parents, grandparents, even siblings as a result of the pandemic. In addition to these losses, some of the family members have lost their jobs, their businesses, and sources of livelihood due to the pandemic. You have students who are returning to school with all kinds of emotional wounds. And to expect a return to normalcy is to make the wrong assumption. We're not sure how much the schools and school districts have prepared to address the emotional trauma and pains that these students are coming back with. In this seminar today, our goal is to begin a conversation with parents on how to support their children by being watchful to notice their pains and challenges and how to advocate for proper support for them at school. My name is Chinaka Donwachuku. I'm the Dean of the College of Education, and I'm here to welcome you to this special webinar. We believe that now, more than ever before, it takes a village to support the students in the Inland Empire so that they can succeed as they return to school. That's the reason why we have taken the initiative to organize this webinar to support our parents, our teachers, and our K-12 students as they make this transition back to school sites. The College of Education's Jim and Judy Watson's Literacy Center is our primary vehicle for parent and community engagement through the college. This center provides reading and literacy support to kids in the community, in keeping with Jim and Judy's vision and commitment that literacy opens the world to an average child and unleashes their potential and sets them on a pathway to success in life. During this pandemic, this literacy center quickly transitioned to virtual operation and continued to provide tutoring to students in the area. By the time our campus reopens in the fall, the center will have a new director, as the current interim director returns to her regular role of literacy coach. The services of this center are here for every parent in the region to take advantage of. Thanks to Jim and Judy Watson, and Jim is here this afternoon to represent the family and the organization. Once again, it is our hope that you will find today's webinar helpful as you work with your local school districts to get your child or your children back to school in a safe and supportive way. Thank you for responding to our invitation and for joining us today for this webinar. Let me welcome Mr. Ted Alejandre, the San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools. Mr. Alejandre is a distinguished educator whose contributions to the Inland Empire have spanned decades. A strong advocate for educational opportunities for all children and a highly celebrated CSUSB alumnus. Mr. Alejandre supports you as parents, your children, and all in the K-12 system as you try to get back to normal with your children and the schools as we try to get out of this pandemic. While he is not physically here today, he has prepared a message that he wants to share with this audience. Again, thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy this webinar. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Ted Alejandre, the San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools. I wish to express my gratitude to parents across our county for your support, patience, and understanding as we continue to navigate the impacts of COVID-19 on our schools and communities. Together, with great partners like Cal State University San Bernardino, we have continued to deliver essential educational programs and services while safeguarding our students and staff. As this academic year comes to a close, I assure you our educators are already preparing for the year ahead and planning for our students' return to safe and engaging classroom environments. There are multiple measures currently in place that we anticipate may continue based on the guidance provided by our state and local health officials. These include having PPE readily available, robust testing programs for both students and staff, and implementation of wellness and hygiene protocols. Facilities and site staff have already done a fantastic job making these preparations, so campuses are ready for in-person instruction. In collaboration with numerous health partners, County Schools has also held several COVID-19 vaccination clinics for our educators and support staff to help fight further transmission. As the vaccine has recently become available for children ages 12 and older, we have expanded our efforts. In partnership with the San Bernardino County Department of Public Health Additional clinics are taking place at locations across the county, including on June the 2nd at the Dorothy Ingram Learning Center in San Bernardino, and on June 4th at the Desert Mountain Educational Service Center in Apple Valley. These free clinics are open to students 12 years and older who live or attend schools in San Bernardino County. For more information, visit myturn.ca.gov. Along with our students' physical health, we are also committed to providing the social-emotional support they need to succeed. We have learned many lessons from the tribulations of COVID-19, and to help prepare for the coming year, County Schools is co-hosting an important event called Back to School in Unity on June 24th. We are joining forces with the Riverside and San Diego County Offices of Education and other partners to support families as students transition back to full-time, in-person instruction. This is just one example of how our local and state educational leaders are teaming with their site staff, parents, students, and communities to keep the learning moving forward. I admire our educators' ingenuity and thank our parents for your assistance in engaging students through this period of distance learning, as well as your ability to pivot back to in-person instruction. It is undeniable that education has truly been transformed during this time. As we continue to plan for the year ahead, I encourage everyone to reflect on what we have learned from this past year, and with this knowledge, we will be able to serve our students from cradle to career even better. Thank you to Cal State University San Bernardino and the College of Education for inviting me to share this message with you today. I am thankful that we can do this work together and ensure that every student has what they need to unleash their limitless potential and achieve their dreams. Thank you. Stay well and keep transforming lives through education.
I would invite Carrie Neal to introduce Jim Watson.
Thank you, Dean Danwachuku. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my absolute pleasure and honor to present to many of you and remind you of those who are also on here who Jim Watson is, formerly known, more formally known as James Watson, but we love to call him Jim, and his wonderful, beautiful wife, Judy Watson, who unfortunately will not be joining us this evening, but please let me tell you a little bit about Jim and Judy Watson. Now, Jim is the president of J.R. Watson Associates Development Corporation, and his wonderful wife, Judy, is the co-president of J.R. Watson Associates Development Corporation. Now, Jim Watson, again, who's the president and CEO of J.R. Watson Associates Development Corporation, and the former chairman of the board for the Cal State University San Bernardino Philanthropic Foundation, where he has been also a member of the executive committee and the board of directors. Since its inception, the Watsons and Associates have been focused on high quality, community sensitive development of mixed-use residential, retail, and office complexes exceeding $1 billion in market value, with more than 35 developments in California, Oregon, Idaho, and Washington. J.R. Watson Associates Development Corporation prides itself on consistently developing projects that set a new and higher standard, for the community aesthetic. Now, since 2003, our campus has been so blessed to have Jim and Judy associated with the university. And they've been contributors and advocates for, in particularly, the literacy center. And they've been very involved with past campaign efforts, and all of their exploits have raised more than $3 million to date in support of many initiatives, including the Literacy Project, the Literacy Center, excuse me. They're also very strong proponents of public art at San Bernardino. And Jim was also instrumental in partnering with the city to display Cal State San Bernardino student art citywide. He provides funding also for the Coyote Conservancy, a performance arts outreach project led by our Theater Arts University department. They've been wonderful, wonderful champions, and we love them very much. It's my, again, distinct honor, pleasure to present to you Jim Watson. Jim.
Jim, you're muted.
I apologize.
That's okay.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. I welcome all of you today to this seminar. What families should consider. Back in October 2020, which seemed like a very long time ago, we held 2 webinars for parents to provide them with tips and tools on how to make distance learning successful for parents and their children. I hope those webinars were beneficial. A recent study published by Stanford University discussed the impact of learning on young students during this pandemic. The report shows that reading fluency in 2nd and 3rd graders are now 30% behind where they would have been in a regular classroom. Reading is a skill that, if not learned correctly, can continue to adversely affect a student's ability to learn other subjects. As schools are preparing to reopen, we know you have many questions and concerns. Today, we have a panel of experts to discuss what going back to school will look like post-pandemic and how parents can help calm some of their concerns and the anxiety of the children. We know the challenges of the past academic year have been overwhelming, but with schools reopening, hopefully it will bring some normalcy back to your and your children's lives. I know firsthand the importance of education and the difference it makes. As Judy and I both had early challenges, because of interventions, we were able to succeed. Judy wants you to know that we're all working on this together to improve your lives. Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to improve your family and the world. The education of our children is always one of our top priorities. Thank you so very much for listening, and I wish you a great enjoyment and a learning experience in today's webinar.
Thank you, Jim, and give our regards to Judy.
I sure will.
Appreciate you. We're now going to go into the full-blown seminar as we turn to Dr. Edwin Hernandez. Excuse me, Dr. Ohandi, Roderick Ohandi.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm really glad that you guys are all here. We've got some, I think, really helpful information, or what I hope to be really helpful information for you. I'm going to share my screen with you so you guys can see what it is that I'm presenting. Let me know if you guys can see this okay. How's that look? Looks okay? All right, great. Okay, so I'm gonna try to give you guys some tips for talking to your kids about schools reopening. Just some really basic general things to consider. Nothing that I think is terribly complicated. All right, so here's sort of the quick to-do list. Some of the things that I'll cover in a little bit more detail. Obviously kids are starting to transition back into school settings, which can cause worry for us as parents and for our kids as well. We want our kids to be safe, happy, healthy, but our children and for us as parents, we may have concerns about safety with schools reopening, and rightfully so. Although we can't fix this problem with a presentation, we can talk through some important information, discuss some general tips and strategies you can use to help your children feel more comfortable making the transition back into school settings. So here's what we'll cover. We'll talk about what stress is, what anxiety is, just a bit. We'll talk about how some stress and worry are also very normal. Kids show different signs of worry depending on their age. So we'll also talk about signs of worry to look for depending on your child's age. We'll also talk about some general tips we can use as parents when talking to our kids about stress in general. And then we'll talk about a few specific questions your children may have about schools reopening to help them feel a bit more comfortable. And finally, we'll also provide some additional resources you can use to support your child's mental health throughout the school year. Okay, so how many of us have ever felt worried or stressed? Everybody should be raising their hands right now, right? Some more than others, for sure. Okay, but we all feel stressed or worried from time to time. Stress and anxiety are actually a good thing in many situations. Stress is a normal reaction to demands being placed on us. For adults, causes of stress are work, finances, and our kids. For kids, common stressors are usually school and friends. Again, though, stress can be a good thing. We don't like feeling stress. So feeling stress can help us take action that gets rid of that stress. For example, parents can stress over having to pay bills, and we all do at some point. So we get up and go to work, even if we don't want to. Kids who care about their grades, even if they don't want to do their homework, will still do it to get rid of the stress that the homework causes them. What matters here, though, is that in these examples, we, as adults, have the skills to get rid of the stress on our own. We know what to do and how to do it in most cases. Kids may feel some stress or worry about going back to school, but they may not have the knowledge or the skills to actually manage that stress. Concern over the transition can make children and parents anxious, especially because of safety concerns and because the future of COVID-19 is still relatively unknown. Worry about the future is normal, though, during this time, so it's important to acknowledge that some level of worry is appropriate and can help us take actions to ensure a relatively smooth transition back into school settings. So for us as parents, we can help our kids cope with this stress and anxiety by providing developmentally appropriate and accurate information about what to expect when they go back to school without panicking and causing any undue alarm. It's important to remember also that children look to parents and caregivers and other adults for guidance on how to react, manage, and deal with stressful situations. Okay, so here are a few common reactions to stress that children may show based on their age. It's broken down by preschool ages, elementary ages, and middle and high school ages, more or less. It's important to note that the increase of stress or anxiety are not the only things that might cause these things. For instance, in the preschool years, it's somewhat normal for kids to feel scared when separated from their parents. But what matters here is that in response to stressful situations, they may show some of these things that are listed here a bit more often. So preschool age kids, you might see your kid experience toileting accidents, which can occur at night or during the day. You may see changes in their appetite, what they prefer for foods, maybe eating less. You might also see some increased tantrums, complaining type behaviors, and like I mentioned, being scared when separated from parents or caregivers. At the elementary age, you'll see a little bit more irritability, maybe some aggression, lashing out a little bit to not just you, but to maybe other siblings, to other kids. You also see some sleep and eating concerns. You'll see changes in their sleep schedule or routine overall, difficulty going to sleep, difficulty staying asleep. And for anybody that's ever experienced a bad night of sleep, you know that the next day you're not really in a great mood, right? So that's just going to cause a little bit more irritability from your kids potentially. You also see some withdrawal from peers, maybe a little bit of clinging behaviors, not wanting you to leave, kind of like what you'd see at the preschool age. A little bit of forgetfulness. It's really easy to be unorganized right now for many kids, and you'll see a little bit more of this if kids start to feel a little bit stressed out. At the high school age or middle and high school age, you'll see some pretty similar reactions overall: sleep problems, eating problems. We also start to get reports of physical symptoms, including headaches and stomach aches. Okay, kids at this age will be a little bit more vocal about those things, but you'll also see withdrawal from peers, loved ones in general, and they may also be a little bit more vocal about things that they see in social media or just the media in general, things going on around the country related to social injustices that may be a contributor to some of their stress. Okay, so luckily for us, these are some general tips that we'll talk about in terms of what can be done when talking to kids about stress, regardless of the cause. You don't have to wait to see the signs of stress to talk to your kids about stress. You can talk about schools reopening even if you don't think your kids are in fact stressed out about it. This is a good way actually to prevent problems that are potentially caused by stress later. You can take a preventative approach, or if your kids are showing signs of stress, you can think about these general tips to address that stress. So I'll go through these in order, beginning with number one. It's okay to ask about your child's thoughts without suggesting that you expect your child to actually be nervous about schools reopening. It's important not to assume that your child is nervous about returning to school. It's likely, but it's important not to make that assumption. Instead, check in with them a bit more casually. Think of it as more of a conversation. For instance, you can ask a general open-ended question like, how do you feel about schools reopening? Or what are you looking forward to about schools reopening? This will give them a chance to tell you about other stuff they may be worried about or looking forward to, in addition to the possibility that they're also worried about it. Number two, if they are worried though, be a good listener. Try not to dismiss your child's fear, even if you think the fears are somewhat irrational, which is possible. Sometimes kids will say they're worried about something that is unlikely to be a real or rational cause for worry and stress. For instance, young kids may be afraid that something bad will happen to you if they leave you to go back to school. How sweet, right? That's pretty nice. I know if I ever have to go anywhere, my daughter says something like that, I want to consider that and acknowledge that, recognizing though that it's not really a rational fear. She's 4, so really it's not very rational. But even if their causes for worry are irrational, listen to what they have to say. Your child's telling you that they're worried because they trust you and look to you as a source of comfort and safety. So it's important not to minimize or downplay their concerns. Listen to what they have to say, help them convey their worries if they're unsure about how to say it themselves, and acknowledge that you hear them. You can say something like, I can see that you're really worried about this, and that's okay. And that sort of statement is appropriate for kids even at the preschool level all the way through high school. Okay, number 3, remain calm and reassuring and try not to overreact. Again, kids look to us as adults during times of stress and will model our reactions to stressors. Try to stay aware of the words you choose and your facial expressions. Have a poker face. If they see you overreact, they may also overreact to stressful situations. But if they see you staying calm, they're just a little bit more likely to stay calm as well. Number 4, and really important, keep explanations age appropriate and be honest with your kids. Young kids will need brief and simple information. They're going to have a hard time understanding the potential risks of COVID-19 and the complexities involved with the safety measures schools need to take as they reopen. But you can give simple examples of the steps people take every day to stop germs and to stay healthy, such as washing hands, and use age-appropriate language, such as adults are working hard to keep you safe, something like that. Older children may have more awareness of the COVID-19 related circumstances, but not all of the sources of information, including their friends and social media, despite what they believe, not all of those sources are going to be providing accurate information about COVID-19. For that reason, it's important to keep explanations age appropriate, avoiding the politics involved with decisions to reopen schools and focusing still on simple steps your kids can take to stay healthy as schools reopen. Number 5 on here, also very important, avoid excessive blaming. One of the first things most people do when something goes wrong is to start blaming other people. When we blame other people, that can sometimes make us feel good because we know we aren't the cause of the problem. But blame almost never actually helps solve the problem. Instead, it just makes other people feel bad or upset. So another general tip that I think is important is to avoid stereotyping any one group of people as responsible for the virus. It's okay to explain that COVID-19 has nothing to do with someone's ethnicity, their culture, how they look, or what language they speak. It's also important to try to stay aware of comments that other adults might be having around your family and be ready for your kids to ask you questions about comments they might hear from other people. Okay, we can put some of these general tips into practice with a few more common questions that you might be asked from your kids about schools reopening. So there's 2 questions listed here. The first one, what if my child has concerns about the spread of COVID-19? It's a fair question. We follow in the general tips that we just discussed. First, listen to the worries and acknowledge that you hear them. Something like, I can see that you're really worried about this. One of the other tips that we mentioned was remain calm and reassuring and avoid overreacting. I can see that you're really worried about this, and that's okay. It's normal to feel worried about this. Another general tip was to use age-appropriate language and to be honest with them. Remind them that you, as their parents and school personnel, are there to help them learn and to do that in a way that keeps them safe. Okay, so I can see that you're really worried about this, and that's okay. It's normal to feel worried. It's a tricky situation, but adults, your teachers, everybody at school are working really hard to try and keep you safe. Okay. You can also discuss what kids can do to slow the spread themselves, depending on their age. Something that you might mention to an elementary age kid or a student that's older is you can also help too by making sure that you wash your hands, following the social distancing rules, and encouraging other kids to do the same. One thing I should mention is that you may also have to speak to your child about stories about COVID-19 that they see on the internet that may be based on rumors or inaccurate information. Depending on your child's age, it's really okay to point out that those stories are misleading or inaccurate, and that not everything you see on TV or social media is going to be true. There are some people, obviously, that are more trustworthy than others, and when it comes to understanding COVID-19, there are people, scientists mainly, who dedicate their entire lives to trying to understand how these viruses start, how they spread, how to prevent them, and how to slow the spread once they do get started. And information from these sources are going to be the most credible. Okay. The second question that you might be asked is, what should students expect when school's reopening? A big aspect of stress and anxiety is fear of the unknown. And sometimes really what the key ingredient is to treating stress and anxiety is helping folks understand what it is to expect. It's exposure to the potential stressors. Okay, and talking through it is one way to expose kids to these causes of stress. In this case, stress being caused by fear of the unknown. Okay, so what should students actually expect when schools reopen? Again, following the general tips that we discussed. First, listen to their worries, acknowledge that you hear them. I can see that you're really worried about this. Remain calm, don't overreact, and that's okay. It's normal to feel worried about this. Use age-appropriate language, and always be honest about this stuff. Explain that schools may look different when they go back. It's very likely that they will, but that the changes are meant to keep everybody there safe, students and staff alike. You can use examples like changes in the school routines, how the classroom is physically set up or arranged. The fact that they might have to wash their hands a little bit more frequently. I'm sure you guys can probably think of other potential examples, but there are going to be some more obvious examples like the ones listed here. They may also need to wear masks. There might be some schools that require that. Some states are requiring it, some states aren't requiring it, but it's likely that kids will have to wear masks at some point in time, which just means that the interactions that they have with other kids and adults might also be a little bit different. Okay, so the last thing here, again, in responding to both of these questions, is to remember to avoid excessive blaming. And something that you might say to your child about this is making sure to point out that this isn't anyone's fault, but that doesn't mean that they can't help the situation. If everybody does our part, things will go back to the way they were much faster. Okay, so those are the very basic general tips I wanted to convey about talking to kids about going back to school and schools reopening. There are other resources available though. These slides are going to be made available. And in addition to that, there are going to be another smaller set of slides that have additional links and resources for addressing your child's mental health concerns throughout the school year, things not just related to anxiety or stress, but also other mood concerns like depression or just low moods in general. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hernandez from the counseling department. Thanks again, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, Dr. O'Hanley. Just give me a second while I share my screen. Hello, everyone. My name is Edwin Hernandez. My pronouns are he, him, his, él. This session will cover the various challenges students face before and during COVID that has directly impacted their mental wellness. This session will also discuss collective strategies to support and center the mental wellness of students and families. So to begin with, here's a working definition of mental wellness, which is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes their own ability to cope with the normal triggers, stressors of life. They can work productively and fruitfully. They can also engage in their environment, and they're able to be constructive members of their community. But here I also draw on critical wellness, which is a concept broadly used in education to really center the role of race, culture, trauma, mental health, social emotional well-being, bias, identity, and the adverse circumstances that inhibit students' ability to be whole in their pursuit of education. So again, these are the working definitions that I'll be using in this presentation. Again, they really inform how individuals are able to thrive and contribute to their communities, but also really take into account the role of race and culture and their ability of nurturing the mental wellness of children in schools. So we know that various challenges existed for students before COVID. As this quote by the US Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, states, prior to the pandemic, we had a system that served some students better than others, and we have to be bold and unapologetic in addressing that. The pandemic revealed many structures of inequality that not only hinders the academic development of students, but also their mental wellness. It further showed that not all students enter the classroom and schools with the same access to resources and opportunities, the same structures and support systems for their growth and development. It's also important to recognize the different identities of students and their experiences and how that impacts their mental wellness to truly foster conditions that will contribute to their healing and learning. Many students enter schools having experienced trauma, anxiety, neglect, discrimination, and racism, which are forms that directly impact the mental wellness and academic development of students. To bring to the forefront some of the challenges that students have experienced, a recent report that centers the voices of students illustrates what their experience were before and during the pandemic. The Youth Liberty Squad is a youth leadership organization which was created to engage high school students to inspire them to become the next generation of social justice leaders in their community. So in 2020, the Youth Liberty Squad, YLS, they disseminated a survey across Southern California in which over 600 students responded to this survey as they took the time to share their thoughts, their experiences, and their concerns, where many of them expressed feeling a sense of anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, feeling socially isolated, and also with limited access to mental health resources during the pandemic. This image here that you see was created by a high school student, Alicia Boone, a high school student in Southern California, which really documents and captures the responses and experiences of students prior and during the academic. So as you can see on the left hand, you see what their experience was in a physical setting, where they had the ability to participate in extracurricular activities. They had access to social workers, to counselors, and to their teachers on campus. They had more one-on-hand direct assistance from their teachers, additional opportunities for after-school tutoring, social interaction with peers, and they had a routine, which is really, really critical, right? And on the right hand, you see what the experiences and challenges of distance learning has been for students, of being at home, where they share their concerns of missing friends, the cancellation of school events and sports, the heavy inconsistency of workloads, family home issues, lack of access to counselors and teachers, lack of hands-on learning, an unhealthy sleep schedule, a lot of distractions and connections with Zoom calls. Many of them express feeling stress, fatigue, and a lot of worries about college, of really not knowing with many of the changes that are happening in the college application process. So here I share with you some testimonies, some reflections of students as they directly share their responses. As one of the students responded, I feel overwhelmed by the amount of schoolwork I am getting. The pandemic already adds enough stress into my life. Many of us need to talk to our therapists, so that really highlights the importance of school-based mental health professionals in schools. Others talked about the importance of having a routine at school was healthy for me, both mentally and physically, but again, it was interrupted with the pandemic. So as parents, as educators, it's important to really listen and learn from the experiences of students as we think about what does it mean and what are we asking of students when we're repopulating and going back into schools. But also it's important to talk about the challenges in addition to distance learning. It is important to recognize the racial injustices and how it also directly impacts the mental wellness of students. Here, I share some examples of the racial injustices that have been happening during the pandemic and even before, from the Black Lives Matter movement, the rise in anti-Asian attacks during COVID-19, and also the presidential election, just to name a few. It's important to note and highlight that not everyone is experiencing the pandemic the same for a range of reasons. Children and adolescents, they also respond differently to challenging events. They respond differently in the ways that they talk about the events, but also in the ways that they behave and in the ways that they express themselves. Additionally, some people experience persistent stress or trauma related to the experiences of ongoing injustice and oppression based on their race, their ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or other aspects of one's identity. So this stress and trauma can be worsened due to the stress caused by the pandemic. So again, as we repopulate and students enter the classroom, how are schools engaging students in these conversations and creating spaces for them to heal and learn about these pressing issues in their communities? In revisiting the report by the students, for the students, here in this two graphics, you can see as students responded in one word, what their experiences have been. And you can see from boring, lonely, sad, good, tired, uncertainty, but also on the right-hand side, there's lessons learned in terms of what has worked, what has been supportive for them. And they talked about friends, school, work, music. So I hope that this can inform the future directions, as some students are already back on campus, some will eventually start in the fall, but it's important to recognize and honor the experiences and voices of students to see what we can do as educators, as caregivers, to support and center their mental wellness. In this section, I want to transition to talk about mental wellness for students, but also for families. Given what has transpired over the pandemic, we start off with the 4 major dimensions of recovery. So the working definition of recovery here is the return to health, returning to a balanced state of physical and mental wellness, workable strength, and effective functioning. So there's 4 particular areas that are critical to recovery. Yet it's important to keep in mind how children and families have been impacted during this time, and how can schools and communities play a role in supporting children and families during the pandemic and as we repopulate in schools. So the first one is health, of making informed, healthy choices that both support the physical and emotional well-being of not only the student, but again, the family. Home, it's important having a stable and a safe place to live. And we know that the pandemic has impacted families in which many folks have lost their jobs, has lost their homes, and there has been instability in many homes, in many families. Purpose is also critical. Conducting meaningful daily activities and having the independence, the income, and the resources to participate in society. And lastly, community. Community is important, as even the students share, of being back in school, of missing friends, or how friends have been important to their development. It is critical in terms of having a community. As the dean shared earlier, it takes a village, right? So community is really critical of having those relationships, social networks that provide support, friendship, love, and hope. When thinking about wellness, it means being healthy in all these different dimensions. And here there's 8 of them. These dimensions are interconnected and they build on each other. From physical wellness, that includes the nutrition, the physical activity, sleep, the importance of having a healthy body, good physical healthy habits. So think about, do you have access to fresh, healthy food? Are you getting regular physical activity? Are you getting enough sleep? Those are important for physical wellness. In terms, the next one, intellectual wellness, that embodies the personal interests, education, brain exercises, and conversation. So it involves many things that keep our brains active and our intellect expanding, learning about current events and engaging in discussion or other ways of gaining an enhanced understanding of issues. So how are we supporting students in a particular topic or hobby of interest? How are we keeping and contributing to the intellectual wellness of students and their curiosity? The third one, financial wellness. And financial wellness impacts the life of individuals and families. It is directly related to wellness. So current events, as I previously mentioned, have impacted the financial wellness of families. Many individuals have lost their jobs, their homes, and there has been instability. The fourth one, environmental wellness, is also important, of having access to clean air, to food, to water, being in environments that support our well-being. The importance of spending time outside, having a healthy home, and being in a healthy school environment are also important. The fifth one, spiritual wellness, and that includes the beliefs, your involvement, having time to meditate or reflect, and being able to really find meaning and purpose in your day-to-day activity. Social wellness as well is really important, of having healthy relationships with friends, family, and the community, finding support groups in your area connected to an important issue. Again, that is really critical in terms of that community. Occupational wellness is another one. That includes for families, your work relationships, having a work-life balance, or even school. So are you in a career that you look forward to and you give a sense of purpose and accomplishment? And then the last one, again, is the emotional wellness. And it involves the ability to express your feelings, adjust to emotional challenges, cope with life stressors, and really enjoy life. It includes knowing about your strengths and also knowing about what areas is it that you want to get better at and working on those, right? But also knowing that there's other folks as well that are there to support you and help you in your emotional wellness. So as we think about help and thinking about a collective care of support system, finding supportive individuals or groups that will nurture and contribute to the mental wellness of students and families is critical. So here I began with some conversations that you could be having at home with your children. But these are also questions that you can ask yourself to reflect upon. Maybe some of these you're already doing, right? So here are some reflection questions to really generate conversations with your child. From what have you been doing during the pandemic to support your mental wellness? What hasn't been helpful during this time that has impacted your mental wellness? Who has supported you during this time that has contributed to your mental wellness? And lastly, what additional support do you need during this time to support your mental wellness? So again, these questions really allow for you to get a sense of what is working and what is not during this time. But again, it's important to know that it's going to look different for everyone. But this truly allows you to learn, again, who has been central to your mental wellness, but also what other support is needed. And when we think about support, schools play a critical role. And there's various folks in schools that are critical, from teachers to also counselors, social workers, and school psychologists, just to name a few, that are directly involved and dedicated to support students in their mental wellness. So it is important to know who these folks are at the school and remain connected with them to truly support the mental wellness of your child. But in addition to schools, there are various ways that you can get support in other spaces, and that is the community. Here I share with you, various resources that are available in the community that you should consider. And here at the center, you have the youth, the child, the student, surrounded by individuals in the community, in the school, in the family, but also wellness advocates, followed by a range of support services within the community to truly support and center the mental wellness of students in their development. That includes, from community-based organizations, community faith-based and cultural services, community parks and recreation, wellness, health and human services, child welfare and foster youth services, and community youth and families. So think about, as we're in the process of entering the summer, what does that mean when many schools might be closed? So I ask you these questions to reflect upon. What type of support do you need during the summer for your children? What opportunities are available within my community? To begin, consider consulting with school staff to really plan and coordinate support services during the summer, when again, some schools might be closed. So here I share with you a resource. In fact, this flyer was shared by one of my former students, who's now a counselor for the school district here in San Bernardino. So again, I share this flyer that has resources that are really important. But I invite you to look within your local context, within your local community, of what resources are available. So here, where do you start? What are some signs to look for? As Dr. O'Hanley touched on various of these signs to look for, right? And other ways to support your child during this process as we repopulate. But again, here are some resources as well that you should consider and start planning and coordinating, not only for the summer, but also for the fall as we repopulate and go back in person. So overall, I hope this session you had an opportunity to learn from the students about their challenges, their experiences before and during the pandemic, but also to think about the different sources of support that are available within your schools and your communities to truly center the mental wellness of students. So with that, thank you. And I'll turn it over to my colleagues, Drs. Nicole Clement, Greg Richardson, and Shannon Sparks from the College of Education.
Thank you, Drs. O'Hanley and Dr. Hernandez. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome. We are so glad that you were able to attend our session. I'm going to give my colleagues opportunity to introduce themselves. I'm Dr. Greg Richardson, College of Education, working with Project Impact.
I'm Dr. Shannon Sparks. I'm in the Department of Special Education, Rehabilitation, and Counseling.
And I'm Dr. Nicole Clement, and I'm in Teacher Education and Foundations.
So I will go ahead and get us a little bit started here. Dr. Clement, Dr. Richardson, and myself kind of sat down and kind of had some talking points for what we wanted to discuss in tonight's session. And there was a few items that popped up on those bullet points that we wanted to share. And the first one was transitions, as well as the classroom environment. So the first thing I just kind of like to throw out either one of you, and I'll be more than happy to start it as well, is looking at that transition and what that looks like, because many of our districts right now are currently on a hybrid schedule, the partnering districts we work with, but also going full-time and going in the fall. What's that going to look like?
Well, I'll jump in first. And I think I'm going to present more of the teacher perspective, because that's where my life lies as a former English teacher in middle school and high school. It's interesting, having listened to our previous speakers, to come look at this in terms of transitions. I was watching Masked Singer last night, and it was interesting to hear how some of the singers were sharing that the reason why they came on the show was because they had been isolated for so long that they felt that they had forgotten how to interact with live audiences, or that perhaps they forgot how to sing well and be entertainers. And I think that some of that anxiety we're gonna see with our educators when students and families interact with their schools and their communities. We've been alone for so long that it's easy to forget how to be normal. And our normal isn't even well defined. As Roderick, I think, was saying, Dr. O'Hanley was saying, that it's going to be different, and we're not really returning to our normal. We're returning to our schools, which haven't changed, but all of us have been changed or transformed by the last year in terms of all of the events. And I think that from a teacher perspective, there are going to be some anxieties. I think teachers are going to do the best they can to be there for their students, to answer questions that parents may have. But by the same token, there may be a lot of times where they're like, I don't know. And everyone's just kind of, you know, taking it day by day, minute by minute, because, you know, we're coming out of something that's unprecedented and people haven't experienced before. And everybody has been transformed by the experience one way or another.
Dr. Klima, I appreciate you saying that. What is normal? I mean, what is normal? It's so different now, right? And I'm coming from it from a parental perspective, and I'm coming from a district that's already doing 5 days a week. So I had to come up with, my husband and I had some very deep conversations of what we wanted to look like for our son. And I always love going to the research. I like seeing the facts. I like seeing what's out there. And I looked at, it was actually one of our master's students. He did his dissertation during COVID, and looked a little bit about the traditional setting versus what the remote setting looks like. And it was so dead on. It's like, okay, what are the complications? Like, you're meeting face to face, you're not able to meet with your peers in the classroom. We're totally in a virtual environment now. And then parents are having, you know, to make these decisions and for their child. Are they making the right decision? Are you going hybrid? Or you're not going hybrid? Should they do the hybrid schedule and go? And I really had to look at that myself. And when I talked to my husband, we thought, you know, and I don't think there is a wrong way or the best way, but it's really what's best for your family. And what we thought was best for our son at the time, him being in first grade, we thought, you know, we're going to continue the hybrid schedule. That's what we thought would, fully virtual. No, we did not go with the hybrid schedule. Let me correct that and back up real quick. We didn't feel too comfortable. We weren't ready. We were still kind of in the pandemic, and we just weren't quite ready, and we didn't know how he would react to wearing a mask in the classroom and not, you know, when you have those little ones, sometimes they're huggers, right? And he'd go up and hug his friends. So I was thinking it's going to look a lot different for him. So we really had to think about that ourselves and think about what that's going to look like. So we decided to opt for the online, and actually he did quite well. So now we have to make a decision for the fall to decide if we're going to do virtual still, or he's going to go fully online.
And I even had student teachers who had to switch from being all virtual to the hybrid. And so talk about being prepared and facing a challenge. Here they are learning how to teach, and they have half their students in face-to-face and half their students online. And sometimes, you know, the school technology hasn't been working for a while, and it had its own glitches. So it's, you know, it's a time of transition, and you're right. I think parents need to make the best decisions they can for their students, and teachers hopefully will be open and graceful in terms of respecting a lot of those changes and the idea that everyone's been transformed.
When we think of transitions, we definitely have to consider what the teachers have in mind, what they've experienced, as well as the students. And both of you mentioned some excellent points. I myself, my children are older, but I am very involved in our grandchildren's educational development. For instance, one of my granddaughters, high school, became second in the state decathlon, academic decathlon. And so we're really involved in what they're doing, but I saw three major things that need to be considered. One is the structure of the classroom, then the socialization factor, and then the classroom management. The structure of the classroom, students have moved from a position where they basically manage their own time with their parents in their home. Now to go back into the classroom, there's a structure as to when class starts, when the different disciplines start in the class, and students have to be mentally ready for that. They also have to consider that parents and teachers have to be ready for the transition as well. And so by the three working together, it can make a smooth transition. Socializing. We're a large family and we do a lot of socializing. And I know many children, they haven't seen their friends in months. And so they would want to come back immediately and start socializing with their friends. But what about that safe distance? How do we instruct our children on how to maintain that safe environment so that they can socialize with their friends? But there's no way that they can really know, that I know of, that the school districts can actually define that everyone has been tested for COVID, but parents can actually find out what measures are in place in the classroom. How are the classroom seats set up, the distancing that takes place, and so forth. And then with that in mind, even with the socialization, teachers have to realize that they have to give space for students to have some type of socializing and not bring in disciplinary measures.
Oh, I totally agree with you, Greg. I think that that's going to be a challenge for a lot of our teachers, you know, reestablishing what those classroom norms and expectations are going to be like, adjusting again to being at a school and having those requirements and procedures in place in terms of how you travel from from class to class, how you engage in group work in the classroom. A lot of those things teachers are going to have to rethink, and yes, it's a brave new world. And I think parents, yes, ask the questions, but also perhaps be a little patient as people try to figure that out, because like I said, it's not going to be the same.
And you know what? I think another thing to think about is also the CDC and how they are following those school reopening guidelines. So I know the districts I worked at, before they went fully 5 days a week, we were rest assured that they were following all the safety protocols. And I was just looking myself, because being a special educator, I want to be informed. I want to be able to make informed decisions for my students always, and for my son obviously as well, being a parent. But they do also say that the transmission rates, however, based on the data that's international and in the United States, that it's very low for 14 years of age and younger. So that is very reassuring as well. And they're following, like I said, the CDC protocols and keeping that in place, and making sure that they also contact families. And so even though my son was staying at home and working virtually, we still received a phone call if there was a positive COVID case, even though he wasn't in the classroom. So there was transparency with that. And I know there's going to be the same thing with all our partnering districts that we work with, and they're following those protocols, making sure that, children are wearing their masks. And as of now, I know, like in the state of California, probably in the fall, they'll probably be, wearing masks as well, unless something changes. But what I had to face, and I forgot to backtrack and share this with you guys, is my son was able to go 5 days a week or do hybrid, but he was also in jeopardy of losing his teacher. So that was another thing I didn't want him to. What can happen from that? We all know, right? Behaviors can start coming out. So I was a little concerned about that. But I think it was just important to share, though, and I'll jump right back, is the CDC and how they're following those guidelines and making sure that we can rest assured, our parents and families can rest assured that they're making sure that the classroom is ready, it's well equipped, and supporting all of our students.
Absolutely. I think schools have taken a great care in making sure that their schools are safe and ready for students to return. One of the things that schools are always concerned about is school safety and student safety. So I'm sure that they're not only following the CDC directions, but they're also following county health regulations and ensuring that all of those things are in place. The few campuses that I visited with my student teachers, it's really quite something how schools have made that switch to make sure that social distancing is maintained.
What does that look like? Because you've been out in the field, right? You've been able to go out into the field, correct?
Yeah,
don't know why I called the field. You've gone to the classroom.
I've been to classrooms, been to schools. Well, like similar to what we see when we go to the grocery store, our neighborhood grocery store, and there's tape on the floors, right? And there's stickers that say, stand here, maintain social distance. You'll see that on a lot of the campuses. So as great reminders. I saw a lot of really cute signs about wearing a mask, with the school colors and the school mascot. So a lot of those things. And then in the classrooms themselves, I've seen the plastic protectors around the desks. I've seen even the way the desks are arranged in the classroom, there's more space there. I know that schools are really thinking about how many students they'll have in a classroom. We have a tendency to see a lot of big classroom sizes in the secondary level. And so some of those schools are now really thinking about their master schedules and how they could reduce the number of students in classrooms. So, but you'll see a lot of colorful posters and reminders about wearing a mask and keeping socially distant.
I'm sure a lot of parents have concerns about the area of trauma, as well as teachers. Our students, as young as they are and sensitive as they are, have been experiencing several different things during the pandemic. As it was mentioned earlier, friends, relatives, individuals that they know had COVID and some have passed on. And just the thought of those individuals that are no longer with us running across their mind can be traumatic. So teachers and parents need to be aware to give their children tools to navigate successfully during these difficult times. Maybe just a time to just have some time out, as it may be, where they can just think about things and just relax and not be engaged as they normally would be. But also making sure that in the event that there's an emotional breakdown, that there are measures in place to assist that child by directing them to the right qualified individuals that can help them.
It's great you brought that up, Dr. Richardson, because I think Dr. Hernandez brought that up a little bit and asked those questions at the end of his presentation. And I really appreciated those questions. Like, yes. Who are your supports? Who can you go to? And I think being a parent, I had to face some challenges. I'm like, well, it's probably not good that we do this. We have to play it safe right now. So yes, there's a lot of that. And then another thing that popped in my mind as a parent, and I'm sure maybe other parents thought this as well, and maybe, I don't know, just gonna throw it out there, is, okay, student goes back to school and maybe there is a possible COVID exposure and then having to quarantine. So there's a lot of different things and factors. So letting them know that, we're doing this to be safe. We're doing this for the safety of all and to help your classmates, because if your classmates went home and then they went over to the parents, it's all about supporting one another. It's coming together.
I think too, it's about being aware. Some of our students may not have the language even to or the awareness to recognize that they may be feeling stress or anxiety or the grief in terms of whatever trauma they've suffered. And so having I've seen teachers really take some time to lean into those social emotional learning practices that we have in place, and taking time. I've seen a lot of our teachers use journaling to help students write and how they're feeling. I had a couple of art teachers that were using art therapy to work with students. And so I think one of the things that I saw when I've been in classrooms with teachers is there is a lot of concern to make sure that there is support for students in the classroom and that we are giving them the language as well as the opportunity to be able to express what they're feeling so that we can connect them with the appropriate supports.
Nicole, I'm so glad you mentioned about art therapy. Music therapy is another strong strategy that would be very helpful during those difficult times.
And I got to see that firsthand watching my son at home, and they would actually do like YouTube drawings, and they would stop and pause during the day or play bingo and just a little bit of a decompression, where they still had that socialization, but not being able to do that exactly in person. So definitely, it's so important.
Some bibliotherapy too going on, although there haven't been very many books that have been written about, the pandemic. There have been times though where there was a plague or just there are novels out there, young adult novels about students who have had to weather trauma of various kinds. And so that's helpful. So one of the things I'm seeing in the English classrooms in particular are those conversations around the text and around what are you feeling while you're reading this, and how are you identifying with the character, and as ways of helping students think about how they can communicate their own feelings and ask for help.
That's really important. Be able to ask for help. You're right.
And knowing how to ask for help, even if it's difficult, but teaching the child how to ask for help when they actually need help.
Right. And just knowing that our adolescents in particular, this has been really tough for them because so much of their identity is wrapped up in being able to interact with their peers.
Yes.
And not having that experience, I'm sure we're going to see a lot of studies on what's happening with the adolescent brain as a result of a year's worth of isolation. So, I think that, at the secondary level, I think a lot of our campuses are really aware of how this is impacting our adolescents and really trying to put into place processes and procedures that are built into the teaching of the content to help students work through some of these issues and think about what's happening to them and how to move forward and persevere.
And I think another thing, talking a little bit about, you talk like the extracurricular activities, and they're losing out on those. So there's so many things that, they were just used to doing as part of everyday life, and things change. There was another thing that was on my mind, and it just is going to skip. It went. I was like, I get so excited. We're talking to this panel, and we're like pinging off of each other, and it's so exciting. But there was something else that came to my mind, but I guess that's what it is. Speaking of going back into the classroom and getting that routine back in place, when I send my son back and thinking about that and what that's going to look like, I'm sure what we need to do is be really patient with our teachers. That was it. That's what was in my head. Thinking about our teachers and knowing that they went from being completely online for about 1 year, and now they're coming back, and then the kiddos come back, and being patient with them as well. So giving them opportunity to, Nicole and I were talking about this earlier, about those rules and those expectations.
Right. Remembering how to do school, how to be at school, and how to do school. It's again coming back to those things that from a nostalgic sense, we all want to be back to normal, but we're beyond normal. And
what's normal? Yeah.
So, thinking about what's the classroom going to look like, and school districts too are also thinking about about the lessons they learned from being in the online environment, and how to use some of those positives to the advantage of students. And so I do appreciate what you're saying about being patient with teachers, being patient with the administrators on the school site. Sometimes what they say they don't know, it's because they don't know. And everybody's trying to really work through and be sensitive. I'm reminded of, Nell Noddings, and what she says about care in school, and how our schools are the community centers. And I think, like you said, I think everybody is eager to get back into some some semblance of a routine that was like it was before our pandemic, but recognizing that some of those things may be a little different. and
another element to add to the patience is communication. I think when parents can talk with the teachers and let them know that I know this is new to you, this particular area, but it may be difficult. So I'm going to work with you as you work with our child on this. And then also communicating with the children, the same thing. Let them know that many times this is new areas or uncharted territory for the teacher, and that they need to have a little patience and understanding as well. And as the communication opens up, all parties involved can see to it that the child is successful in the classroom.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And that's why, as a parent, I made sure that I maintained my communication with my son's teacher and interacted. He was on top of his schoolwork. So we kept a constant line of communication. And it was a little bit different because it was online, but it made me also think differently what I want to do when he goes back in the fall and when he's in person, and how I want to make sure that I still make that effort even a little bit more. So I know to be more sensitive, because it's going to be a new environment for him. And he's already saying, I'm not going back. I'm staying home. And I'm like, you're in for a big surprise. So it's going to change. But what I'd like to do is I found a good resource, because I know our students are going to be returning back in the fall and wearing masks. And since I'm a special educator and my love and my passion for my students with special needs as well, this is great for individuals with or without disabilities. It's a toolkit from the Strong Center for Developmental Disabilities for helping your child wear a mask during COVID-19. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat box. It basically has tips and strategies. You have to have fun when you're finding that mask. You have to use social stories, use images, talk your child through it. I know it's for probably geared more towards elementary age, but you never know, it could benefit. You never know who it will impact. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat box if there's any parents or families, or share that resource, or any districts that are on today that could share that information with anybody. I think that would be really quite helpful.
Sounds like a great resource. Thank you.
Great. I will go ahead and do that. Is there anything else we wanted to share before we transitioned into the Q&A? Because we want to give our parents and families the opportunity to ask questions to all the panelists.
I think we've done a good job talking about the different perspectives.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you to all of you, and thank you to Dr. O'Hanley and Dr. Hernandez as well for your timely information during this time.
Yes.
So I think we will go ahead and transition to the Q&A so we can get questions from our parents or families for any of the panelists. If you have, if you want to know from a parent perspective, or just if you have any question at all, we welcome it.
So if you have a question, you can type it in the chat, or you can use the raise hand function on the Zoom.
Well, I did put, just so you guys are aware, that information on mask wearing is in the chat box right now. Just a link. I know there's questions out there. Does anybody have a question? We'll be more than happy to answer it.
I'll just say, as a parent, I really appreciated everyone's presentations. I have 2 high school freshmen, and it has been an interesting transition, but I also am very close to my niece and nephew who are in middle school and elementary school. So we've had some interesting conversations already about what things look like going back in the classroom, especially with my nephew who's a first grader. And I know that my my sister has he's experienced the things that you were talking about you know, sleep patterns being disrupted and really not knowing how to perceive what's going on around them. And I really picked up a lot of great tips that I'm definitely going to be sharing with my family, and also with my boys who are in high school. So thank you for that. Okay, we have a question in the chat. Dr. Hernandez, would you be able to ask the question in English for our panelists?
Sure. So there's a question by Dayanara. I'm afraid for my children to transition back into school right away. And I'm afraid that they will eventually get sick. So the question is regarding concerns regarding making that quick decision for their children to you know, go back into school physically.
I can be one of the ones to speak on that. It would be wise to talk to the school to express that concern to the administration. Some schools still offer virtual school opportunities, but only for those parents who ask, and to find out what other alternatives exist for their child. And then, of course, it's important to find out what the school has in place preventative-wise to keep their child safe.
Leonora, I would like to also include, I can relate with you being a parent as well, and knowing that was my fear. I'm just kind of feeling a little bit more comfortable. I'll give you another reasoning why I feel a little bit more comfortable. As I've seen, I live in another state where they're completely in person. We still have the option of doing online, but the transparency of the principal and letting us know when there was a positive COVID case, which there was not many at all. So that kind of eased my fears. And I also know that just, you know, making sure he was wearing his mask, that he was practicing good hygiene and just staying on top of that. But I do understand your concerns, but I do feel confident that our districts are following those protocols and making sure that they're providing a safe environment for your child. But I do understand where you're coming from, because I'm a parent as well.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And as from a more of a teacher perspective, I appreciate your fear. I think everybody's a little fearful about being back in that environment and interacting with people. And we have a comment from somebody from the Fontana School District. Again, I think parents do need to interact with the school, find out what the school is doing. Schools are really working hard to make them safe spaces for students. We know that learning face-to-face is really important. So I do think that reaching out to your school and speaking to your administrators, reaching out to the school district office even, and asking some of those questions may help you with some of your fears. And maybe you'll feel more comfortable allowing your student to return to school. And that I think is really important. And I think Dr. Richardson had mentioned that from the beginning, reaching out to the school and to your teachers and your administrators and having them explain to you what safety measures they've put in place and the precautions that they're taking to make sure that each student is safe while they're at school.
I also think it's important too that I know the vaccine is, the ramping up that, so that a lot of the teachers are vaccinated and the administrators as well. So know with that ease and comfort as well. But just like Michael Garcia said in the chat, just make sure you contact and just know, I think everyone at the school site wants to, remain safe as well and keep free from getting sick.
And it's not unusual for children to have fear of the unknown. And Dr. O'Hanley really touched upon it very well. He indicated that we need to be able to talk to our children, but talk to them at their level of understanding so they understand what's going on. That would make them feel a lot better.
There's just a comment in the chat. Thank you to all the panelists and presenters. Your information focused on the needs of all families and children. Very straightforward and relevant. And then I believe, Dr. Hernandez, that is a thank you in the chat as well.
Yeah, so that's a follow-up. Thank you for the responses and the feedback.
Okay, I think we have had a very productive afternoon. And for those of you who are parents, I would like to inform you that this program will be on our website so that people can go back and look at it and watch it. In case you have friends or relations who could not make it, but they would like to view the presentation, they can actually view the presentation in full. So we appreciate the work done by our panelists and presenters, Dr. Sclimo, Dr. Sparks, Dr. Richardson, Dr. Hernandez, and Dr. Handy. Thank you for very quality work that you have done. And I believe that what we have done tonight will help alleviate fears and concern and also help parents prepare to engage. We will need to get back to normal. We will need to move forward. Yes, we've been in a place of fear and uncertainty, but I think it's about time we begin to re-engage. And I want to assure you that the schools are doing everything they can to make the transition smooth. So let's go forward with positive attitudes. Again, let me say thank you to Andrea, who has been the director of our Watson Center, done an excellent job and facilitated a whole lot of things for us. We are appreciative. Let me thank Jason Bullock, our marketing director, and his own staff for all the promotional work that has been done, and the Dean's office, Dr. Richardson, Jennifer, and everybody else that have worked on this. I appreciate you. Thank you. To our parents and participants, you have a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you again. Thank you.